I don't know if you caught that Bible story, but it's akin to Ocean's 11, the movie. It's like a James Bond spy thriller. Spies and presidents and prostitutes. We've got a scrappy underdog invasion from a ragtag army of liberated slaves. They're about to go into Jericho. They sneak into the city, some scouts, to help it, figure out their mission. And they get help from a local prostitute named Rahab. And it ends up that these people were hidden under flax, and they escaped down ropes over the wall, and Rahab was hanging her scarlet out the window so that she would be saved from the coming invasion. And then maybe most shocking of all, and this is later in the Bible, Rahab ends up in the genealogy of Jesus, one of only 4 women mentioned in his ancestry. That's a movie I'd pay $8 for at Cinemark. I'm just saying. Or is it 10? I don't know how much it is anymore. But the story, like many others, displays how God can utilize anyone in any situation. So don't judge a book by its cover. Thank you. That could have been the title of today's message. But we're continuing to look at how the Beatitudes and learning from them, living by them, claiming them, creates a new and a fresh community and a culture. And in this day and age, very important to focus on these. And so today, as we heard, it says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." We're in a difficult season, and I'm not talking about the weather right now. The good news is that in any season, God looks at the heart. God is looking for those people on the inside who want to make a difference. Rahab was on the inside of this kingdom in Jericho. And she had heard about how this God was working in the world, and she had come to faith in this foreign land. Her display of faith and courage and discernment and wisdom shows us sometimes you have to take a stand in the system you're in. And it's scary. And how God, though, works subtly behind the scenes. This is also, we're in the midst of February is Black History Month. I did a piece in the weekly highlighting a lot of different celebrations and struggles of Black history. Sometimes we forget that even though the Civil War was won and slaves were freed, war doesn't change hearts. And so there were still people after the war who still believed in the slavery of African Americans. And so that was really just the first step in that direction of continuing to eradicate racism. I want to highlight someone today. One of the things we're looking at is the surprising ways that God will work in situations and the people that God can utilize, people like you and me who are far from perfect. There's a man named Henry Highland Garnett, was born as a slave in Maryland in 1815, born into slavery. When he was 9, his family secured their freedom via the Underground Railroad. Again, at that time, the Underground Railroad was illegal. Right? So slaves were escaping, and people along the way were helping them. It was against the system of that time. But there were people like Rahab's along the way who were willing to risk their lives, their homes, by helping these people get through to freedom. So in 1834, Garnett and some of his classmates formed their own club, the Garrison Literary and Benevolent Association. Because the society was named after an abolitionist, people who were against slavery, the public school where they were meeting said, "You can't meet here unless you change that name. We don't want that name associated with us. So the club went to a different location, different venue. And their group had over 150 African Americans under the age of 20. Garnett is perhaps most famous for his radical speech in 1843 entitled An Address to the Slaves of the USA. In this speech, Garnett speaks directly to those enslaved, urging them to rebel against their masters. Because of his outspoken views and national reputation, he was a prime target during the 1863 New York City draft riots. Rioters mobbed the street where he lived and called for him by name. Fortunately, several neighbors hid him and his family and kept them safe. You see the continued image here of doing the right thing, of following God sometimes is not easy. And the typical stories in a Bible story from this time in this culture would have been men. It would have been these spies. But if you look at that story, the spies are not even named. Only Rahab is named and honored. God's chosen people were helped by a woman from a different culture. The spies were ultimately insiders, part of the covenant of God. Rahab would have been looked at as an outsider, immoral for her job. Don't judge a book by its cover. And then Rahab's speech to the spies is quite amazing. Let's pull that apart for a minute. She has some knowledge about God. She says, Yahweh has given you this land. So she recognizes Yahweh, God. She's heard about God's good works and the Red Sea and how the Israelites got through that. She says, your God is the God above heaven and earth. It's hard to overstate how shocking this is. This woman who's been in Jericho, locked into this profession, right? They call it the oldest job in the world. Women still today fall into it out of addiction, out of broken families, out of desperation. Rahab wants to provide for her family. And here come these spies saying, can you help us out? We've got to get in here and figure this place out. Rahab's speech shows that she's a believer. She believes in God. She wants to see this God come in and actually overthrow her own city, her own nation. She's willing to go through that sacrifice. So the New Testament writers recognize her. Again, Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. She's listed as one of 4 women in Jesus' genealogy. The author of the book of Hebrews includes her among the great examples of faith because she welcomed the spies. Not only did she welcome them, she helped them to escape and told them where to go and when to go. The letter of James offers Rahab and Abraham as examples of faith. The word about Rahab has gotten around, and her reputation totally changed. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Moses, a man who ran from justice, God used him. Jonah ran away from God's call. God still used him. Rahab ran some kind of brothel. God used Rahab. Sarah ran out of hope. Still had a child. Lot ran with the wrong crowd. God used them all. And David, as we know, fell from grace as well. God still used David mightily. Another true story. about people, unusual people along life's path that become messengers of God. So the question, why did Desmond Tutu become an Anglican priest? Right? This is in Africa. Most of us have heard of him, but you have not heard of Trevor Huddleston. Yet without Trevor Huddleston, we may not have this anti-apartheid leader named Tutu. So, in a report by the BBC, asked for his defining moment in his life, Desmond Tutu spoke of the day he and his mother were walking down the street. Tutu was 9 years old. A tall white man approached, dressed in a suit. In the days of apartheid, when a black person encountered a white person on the path, the black people were told to step aside and to let the white people pass. But in this situation, the white man stepped aside and allowed the Tutus to go by. In fact, the white man even said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way you've been treated." And he went on to say he was an Anglican priest. His name, Trevor Huddleston. This was the inspiration for Tutu to become an Anglican priest, which was unusual in Africa. Huddleston later mentored Desmond Tutu, and Tutu, as we know, went on to fight apartheid, racism, and slavery in Africa. God sees what no one else can see. God sends special, surprised, unexpected messengers into our lives. Sometimes God calls you to do things you think you're not ready to do. Me? I was just shopping. Who am I? I'm just this person. How can I do this? I'm not clear. I'm not clean. I don't have a perfect life. God can't use me. I've done this, I've done this, I've done that. We judge ourselves and we also judge others so quickly. Look at the disciples that Jesus picked: fishermen, tax collectors, everyday people with jaded pasts, with irreligious lifestyles, with no experience in the temple. And Jesus says, "Go in my power and in my love, and you will be my messengers." Well, as a result of what's going on this week, I came upon a story in the news, inspiring, about neurodivergence. Neurodivergence. So some of you may have heard of this kind of a category of people with a range of diagnoses. And because of the DEI program and funding, there was then the ability for folks in the neurodivergent category to be able to go to universities around our country. They created avenues for folks to get into schools, because sometimes you can be the most brilliant person, but if you have this neurodivergent issue happening, it may limit your liberal art perspective. So you might be brilliant in math, but totally fail at history and English. Guess what? You probably are not going to do well on SATs. You're probably not going to have the grades to get into the University of Michigan, for instance. True story. Northwestern College, this professor tells a story. They had that program, and this woman, professor, said, "I had never had a specialized student in my class until last year. I'm a physics and an astronomy professor. I've earned my master's in education. I have my physics PhD. I was trained in the importance of classroom integration, of including my students in the dialogue. And so when this program director came to me and said, 'I have 2 students for you,' I honestly struggled with the thought. I wondered, how will I include them in our classroom discussions?" But here we go. 2 young men came in. Ned had a more profound learning challenge, and Ben was on the autism spectrum. I've changed their names for privacy, she says. Ned brought with him an excitement for learning. During my lectures, he would research topics on his laptop. He was deeply diving into the content on a regular basis. Ned was a joy to have in class. He struggled a little more in his communication skills. But on the first day, he was there 45 minutes early. He wanted to be ready. Ben had more of a black and white worldview. He expressed his opinion bluntly and honestly. And so when we had classroom discussions, some of that would go into theological perspectives coming from Ben. He asked good questions about, well, why would God create just one planet with human life on it? And if there are aliens, why haven't we met them yet? And why is there this huge universe that we're speaking of? And we are kind of the center of God's attention. He asked good questions. He wanted to understand. As a person of faith myself, I appreciated this dialogue, integrating science and faith for the first time in my career in the classroom. During the final week of class, my students gave presentations on topics of their choice. In order to receive a passing audit for the class, Ben and Ned needed to present as well. Ned exuberantly tackled the assignment and presented on black holes in the universe. Did a great job. Surprised everyone. The time came for Ben to present. He shuffled to the front of the classroom and said, "I forgot to bring anything with me today." I said, "Well, what do you have for us? What do you think you learned this semester?" Little did I know what was about to happen. Ben stood before the classroom, fidgeting at the front desk. Then in a deep and beautiful baritone voice, he began to speak. In the flat affect of an individual with severe autism, his presentation became a sermon. He said the following: "We live in a universe that is so big, we only use a tiny fraction of it. For years, I could not understand why we would live in such a big universe and only use a tiny little bit of it. It did not make sense to me. In taking this class, I've come to realize that the universe is big because God is big. God is showing us magnificence through creating a universe that reflects his character. There is so much we do not understand about the universe, and that's okay. We do not know about dark matter. We do not understand dark energy. So, too, we have much to learn about God. The bigness of the universe shows us the bigness of God. I still have many questions, but it is clear to me that the universe could only have been made by a creator. So this is what I have learned from the class. God is big, God is real, and God made an incredible universe full of mystery. And God loves us." As he finished speaking, looking up at the class, there were tears rolling down the faces of the students, as well as my own face. It's amazing how God can speak in the most surprising of people and places. The neurodivergent population was one of the many folks who were recognized and blessed by the DEI, which is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program. It's losing its funding. In light of that, we are inspired by people like Rahab to have that heart that seeks God, to make a difference. What can we do to circumvent these situations, to go around, to still make a difference when it seems that there's a wall up and there's limitations and we're not the right people and we're not in the right place? What can we do? Because God is bigger than the systems and the decisions that are being made. God still has people like you and me here who can step up and be like Rahab. Amen.